You're listening to Forever Fierce with Catherine Grace O'Connell, only on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome to Forever Fierce. I'm Catherine Grace O'Connell, and we are live in studio here at LA Talk Radio in Los Angeles, City of Angels, right?
You're good so far.
And I'd like to introduce you, if you guys don't know, my co-host today is Michael Castagna. He is also the other kind of half of Forever Fierce and the photog, the lucky photog behind the lens.
Totally lucky.
Totally lucky.
And yesterday was National Cat Day.
It was National Cat Day.
And so you got a post from me about being a cat. So.
You did?
Yeah.
Cat in the Hat.
You didn't even see the post?
I didn't see his post.
All of the girls from the Forever Fierce commented on it. So,
they did, all the girls, and especially the other cat from across the pond. Hopefully she did. So today I have a really, really special guest who is on the line right now from Ireland.
Before we get into that,
Ireland.
can I just say one thing before we even get to Ireland? Ireland is
Before we
kind
get
of
to Ireland.
connected because Boston is Irish.
Oh,
right?
Boston.
And
what's
the
going on
Boston
in
Red
Boston?
Sox won the World Series, so we love that dirty water.
We love that dirty water. And don't you start breaking out in song
I
here.
could break out in song, but I won't because...
So congratulations to the Boston Red Sox. We are super excited. That was a huge victory, and here we are in LA. We probably shouldn't be saying that. We might get I don't know. We
Dodgers
might get,
fans,
we
my
have to dodge
heart
those,
breaks for you.
Dodge those Dodgers fans.
Dodgers, yeah.
So, well, we have a beautiful guest calling in from Ireland across the pond, another one across the pond. And our guest today is Allison Keating. Allison is an amazing psychologist and one of the women in our Forever Fierce community, Hilda Smith, over the Hilda, who's a favorite in our community, just her lovely, lovely, lovely posts. I caught a post that she had put up about this book, and the book is The Secret Lives of Adults. And it is all about your 7 key relationships and how to make them work. And we've got Allison on hold here right now. So we're going to connect Allison and welcome her to the show and dive into this amazing book. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Hi, thank you so much.
You bet. We're so excited to have you. So I happened to see this post on Facebook, and there was just something about it that really caught my attention. I guess it's, I know in my own life that I've had many secret lives, and I think so many of us these lives are secret even, to ourselves. So I'm really excited to, dive into this book, but, starting with you and 18 years, you've been a psychologist. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I've earned adulthood in it.
You have earned adulthood, and I imagine. I love your metaphor about the Russian dolls. I didn't have many dolls growing up, but I did have those little Russian dolls where one was inside the other, was inside the other. And that was such a lovely analogy to really who we are on the inside.
Absolutely. And I suppose it just came to me really when a client would be sitting in front of me and there would be one person talking, but I would see, literally 7 different selves, and people would be talking about trying to manage all the different selves, and each were so separate yet connected. So it was just the analogy of the Russian doll just came to me one night, and I was like, that's exactly what's going on. We have so many different lives. Some we're aware of, some we're not aware of, but the impact and the influence it has upon us is huge.
It is huge, and I think there was one thing that you said that really seemed to be the essence of it. You said those clients come into your office and the mask falls.
Mm.
We're all wearing a mask, or like you said, multiple masks, and many times those masks get so disguise that we don't even know all the different selves inside of ourselves.
Absolutely. And I suppose a big part of that is because so much of it is completely not within our grasp. So when I looked to, say, the first chapter, it was me, myself, and I. And where I got that kind of concept from was this idea of the me is the public face, and the public isn't superficial. We need to be able to go about our daily lives, have the chit chat, kind of talk with people in a straightforward way. But when the gap between the public face and the private face was getting bigger and bigger, and that's what I was seeing, I found people were stretched and getting more and more stretched, and that sense was really uncomfortable and massively overwhelming between their public self and their private self. So when they'd come into me, the mask would fall. But I think what most people didn't know was that in everyday life, this person was really highly functioning, maybe too highly functioning. That was the problem. They were trying to be perfect. And that they were so ashamed that if anyone actually knew they were struggling, had normal mental health issues that everybody has, because life throws many curveballs our ways. And I think we have this underlying myth that we should have it sorted just because we're adults. But really, we never received a manual. And that's where the idea of the book came from. I was like, wouldn't it be nice to have a bit of an adult manual? Because there's plenty for children, there's lots for adolescents, and yes, they need them. But there's so much uncertainty in your life as an adult, and yet we have this paradox that we're supposed to know how to do it all, and yet we've never normally faced the challenges we face that are on a continuum of change as adults.
I love that, because you really are. It's a lot like Brene Brown, who is a hero to me, and her TED Talk on vulnerability and shame. You know, that we all carry this sort of hidden shame, and there's no reason for it, because the truth is it's very normal. Like you said, it isn't. I don't even like the word mental illness. I like mental wellness. It's just mind health. And being, it starts with just being real with ourselves and starting to meet these different selves inside of ourselves and integrating them.
But I think that, the masks come on because the narrative that we have playing in the background, sometimes some aspects of it we're aware of it, but other we're not. The analogy of the good girl and trying to please everybody in all your relationships, or the man who feels that he has to be a certain way, otherwise he isn't masculine. And these very rigid kind of 2D kind of cutouts of people, they don't give the full range of all the different selves. And I think we try and box ourselves too much into I am this, when really it's an essence, and we're constantly growing and changing. But I believe as adults that we don't recognize them as growing pains that we kind of honor within our adolescence. We feel that they're shameful, that we haven't actually figured it out yet. And I think that's a pity, because I would love just to marry more authenticity and vulnerability and just being real and saying, this is actually how I'm feeling at the moment. There's just a bit too much going on. I'm under a bit too much stress. And if we share that with other people, all of a sudden the load is carried differently. And I think saying it out loud is very different as well to actually keeping it to ourselves. Unfortunately, we get kind of caught up in, as I said, these old narratives that sometimes are intergenerational and sometimes are unconscious, that they've come from our parents and our family of origin. And it's just to kind of look and understand what's triggering you. And many times it's coming back to the hidden self or the inner child. And we're just being re-triggered. I think within our other relationships, whether romantic, with our children. So we're constantly like a mouse getting caught in a trap all the time, and we're just being set off unless you actually can go back and attend to the wound. Because I think we've become, blasé. When someone says, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? It's like a sing-song that nearly goes on, and yet maybe you're not okay that day. And if we were authentic about that, I think the world would be a more compassionate, connected place.
Well, Mike, we're just coming off of the weekend, the Fierce Con. I told you a little bit about it, Allison, and Mike was there to really experience it. And Mike is on the back end of a group of women, and certainly men experience things differently. But seeing how many women came into this event, we had women from the UK, from New Zealand, all over the country, and even women on my own team that were terrified, literally terrified, grown women. And I can certainly relate to that experience, because we shrink back, and somehow, like you said, those old wounds and those old stories, and that middle school girl who was hurt or bullied or, in her own family, those wounds just open up. And Mike, what did you experience this weekend? Because you were filming it all.
Well, the experience of the weekend from someone who was viewing it was very powerful, because you saw a lot of people shedding some things. But the thing I want to ask you, Allison, is that we're complex as individuals. We just really are. And I think it's probably a mistake for anybody to say this is your persona, this is who you are, because don't we take on multiple abilities to deal with certain situations? Some of them are born out of a wounding or a hurt, but some are born out of expediency too. Sometimes we take on a persona or put a mask on that actually helps us get through something. So how do you look at that from your perspective? What is the differentiation between those two things, and what is the balance people try to achieve? Because we are not one person. Sometimes we are a lot of different facets.
Do you have a specific idea in mind?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're calling, you just put an order in online with Amazon, and the order got delivered incorrectly, and what you really want to do is get that problem solved, but you're really kind of pissed off that this all happened because it came late. But you put on your nice face because you know that that's going to get a quicker result with the person on the other end of the line.
Okay. It's really funny. So are we allowed to curse on this?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Knock yourself out.
I came across a really funny book yesterday called How to Adult, and it was really hilarious. So this is a bad curse word, so let me know if it's okay. But it said, in terms of work scenarios, that you have to replace "fuck you" with "great, thanks." And I just thought, wow, that is really interesting. Are we in a constant state of suppression? And as you said, overtly being polite, because we know, and I suppose what we're looking at there is transactional analysis. We have been taught and conditioned to be a certain way to get what we actually want. Now, am I advocating kind of falling down scenario? Not really. I don't think that's going to work either. But I sometimes think, say specifically in trying to get something resolved, wouldn't it be great just to be a little bit more honest? And I actually think sometimes maybe it does work better and say, listen, I've had 2 or 3 phone calls about this. I've had lots of different emails. Really, I want to get this sorted. I've wasted a lot of time. I wonder what it would be like to be more honest, but to be mindful of your tone. And I think you can really, and I mean this in the right way, influence, not manipulate, but I think you can influence people if you feel like, look, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm actually hoping to achieve. And to shed that old idea that it's kind of to kind of go in black or white, that we go too kind and too kind of sheepish, or we go too far and become aggressive. I would love us to go more authentic, and down that road it would be actually saying how you feel, but kind of in a direct rather than an aggressive way.
So you're allowed to be authentic and express yourself, but kind of being aware and mindful, like you said, the energy behind it. If it's coming from anger, that certainly isn't going to serve us. So you're not repressing that. You are just learning to express it in a way that is able to resolve the situation.
Exactly, because I say specifically with anger, it's something that I really have come across so much in terms of suppression. And I really work, it might be 60-40, women to men that I actually see, but for women specifically, they have been cultured to suppress their anger, and a lot of times I'm just encouraging them to honor that the anger and its prime motivator is to for you to say, to create a healthy boundary and say, actually no, I'm not okay with this is not all right, and to express when you feel an emotional or a physical or a verbal violation has been crossed. And I think these are this is the language. These are the adult skills. I wish we were encouraged really to actually express and to have a language that was based on understanding the purpose and intent and biological drivers of our emotions, but to marry it with real life and how to kind of progress along better in a way that actually doesn't leave you feeling constantly irritated and annoyed, and like you're suppressing. Because I think, say for example, that scenario you gave, it's a really good example. What happens then when you go home? Often perhaps the people who are nearest and dearest get it to you, even if you're just in a bad mood. And then we have emotional contagion. So then your bad mood ripples through the house. So you've kept that negativity from, the person who perhaps could have heard it in a in a genuine way, and it being serving you, but then it gets translated and rippled back into the home.
I love that example you just shared. It triggered something pretty major in me. I grew up in an environment, my father was an alcoholic, and he was an orphan who was abandoned. So he had all kinds of emotional things he never expressed. And after he passed away, my brother had worked for him, and he said he had his own company, a tool and die company, and he said his employees just worshiped the ground he walked on, because when he went into work, he was this one person. And he would hold everything in, and the minute he would walk in the door of our home, the garage door would go up and I would run, because he would walk in the door and it was GD this and GD. I mean, he started swearing at the top of his lungs, and anything and everything triggered him. He was known as the goddamn dad to all my friends. He was terrifying, but there was two different selves. And I think so many of us, maybe not to that degree, but do, it's when we suppress and repress these emotions, which are just energy in motion, it's like a volcano and uncontrollable when they come up.
See, I think there's more to this, though, and just to give you a little background, Allison, I'm an engineer by nature, so I look at making a diagram out of the problem, seeing what the issue is, and my question is, how much of this is really self-based, and how much of it is environment-based? So we all have something that's our self, and it's inside us, it is who we are, yet it's so very much affected by an individual environment that we may find ourselves in at a certain time. And I think that if we took anybody and changed the environment, you would see a change in their behavior. And I think sometimes that's probably a good thing, because sometimes you could be saving your own life by changing the way you respond to something. But how much is this really our society? How much is it that society, and what I saw, back to Catherine's original question about FierceCon, so many women there take on the persona of what society tells them they should be. And part of their experience that FierceCon gave them was that I don't have to do that anymore. I can be who I want to be, and I can stand in that truth and stand in that power. But that can sometimes be very difficult, and sometimes maybe not the best course of action, depending on what your environment is.
I suppose if we take it from the first level, that you, as a child, sometimes you don't have that autonomy over the environment that you're within. So if it is negative and dysfunctional, and as Catherine's saying, if you're the child of an alcoholic parent, there are wounds that will be inflicted. What I think is amazing, though, is when we actually learn about who we are, and we begin to understand our family norms, and then we begin to recognize and see clearly that the insight that comes from that is incredibly powerful, because then you have a choice. So my favorite psychologist is Viktor Frankl. And I remember I had an exam on cognitive psychology the day after, but I came across this book and sat in the window in college and read the thing book to cover, and it was life-changing for me. And Viktor Frankl, I'm sure you know, but for anyone who doesn't, he was a really well-renowned psychiatrist. He was taken into concentration camps, and basically all of his family minus one of his sisters survived. But he used to give lectures to the prisoners, trying to get them to imagine they weren't actually in the situation that they were in, just to give them some freedom. And he said the last of the human freedoms is that they can't take away how you think. And I would be a massive advocate that no matter what has happened to you, because awful things happen to people. And I think the biggest travesty of all is when it actually creates this legacy where you feel disempowered and you feel like something has robbed this of you. So I think when these women are in something like, your conference, and they begin to see, and it's like a light bulb goes off, and they realize, I don't actually have to be this way. I have a choice. There's a freedom I can choose in how I respond. And one of his lines, which was life-changing for me, and it's really nerdy for me to commit this, but He said there's a gap between stimulus and response. So basically, when something happens, you have the freedom to choose how you react. And for me, that's the core. So your environment, your society, yes, it will cultivate you, it will change you, you will be conditioned, you will be influenced. But the more you kind of clear it away, it's like clearing a dirty window. The more insight you have to yourself and awareness, with the magic trick of knowing what to do next. Like, as a psychologist, I'm more interested in the how. How are you going to change, rather than the why? You know, if we take it from a different perspective, if you have the flu, and if you realize, oh, I know why I have the flu. I went out yesterday, I got wet, I got cold, and now I'm very ill and I actually have the flu. You having the why doesn't actually change the fact that you're very ill. And I feel the same way in general about, you know, your mental well-being. Always understanding the why, it doesn't save you. You need to know how to change. And that was the premise behind the book. So regardless of what situation you came from, and after I read that book, my first job was with, you know, people who were prisoners of war. They'd all had post-traumatic stress disorder. They were seeking asylum in Ireland. And I saw things that I've never seen since. The depravity of the torture was, you wouldn't believe what human beings could do to each other. And I was shocked when I would see some people who, they were like phoenixes. They just rose from the ashes and they were so strong. So my belief in the human spirit, when it wants to change, regardless of literally being in a living hell, it inspired me more than anything in my whole life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I love what you shared about there's this gap and, like you said, the response and the reactionary sort of culture we live in. And you talk a lot about meditation in your book, and the two really coincide because there is a space between our thoughts, right? We don't necessarily think that because there's so many thoughts going in our mind at all times. But when we, you know, you talk about mindfulness and how important it is, and all that really is giving us that gap so we can be more awake and aware of what's going on in our inner world that's affecting our outer world.
Absolutely. And just to pause, it's something you have to practice because it's really hard.
It's really hard.
When you're having an argument with someone, you just want to then you did this and you did that, and you know that's what you want to do.
Oh, gee, I never do that.
No, actually, the better part of this, Allison, is you hit on something that really is close to home for Catherine and I. You know, we run a business together, and running a business, you always have some successes, failures, things that happen, things that disappoint you, and we have very, very different makeups, and you brought in something that's really pertinent, which is, why do you always need to know why? It's like, and we have this discussion all the time. Something happens, Catherine wants to sit there and say, well, why did this happen? And I'm like, hey, the horses are out of the barn. I don't care why they got out of the barn. Let's get them back in. And that takes balance too, right? Because you have to go back and look at why things occurred. But do we as people always have probably too much of an interest in the why, in what in fact is probably well, it's not probably, it is a probabilistic world?
I mean, obviously I work from a very kind of psychodynamic point of view, first of all, so I'm looking right back to the beginning with your family, and I am absolutely interested in where your belief systems have come from, and trust me, they have come from your parents. But I am then very much, I kind of work on a balance of past. So I want to kind of glean, where did these belief systems come from? Why is this your norm? Why do you believe it has to be done this way? And the more you feel something has to be done, the more it's rooted in the past. And then I bring it right back to the present moment. So then it's very much CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's solution focused. It's like, that's okay, we understand where this has come from. Now what are we going to actually do about it? So I feel in terms of the narrative, well, say only I can speak for Ireland, there's a lot of kind of positive talk about, you know, mental health. And yet sometimes I think it lacks the how. You need to know how to do it. Like if you were going to make a cake, you don't just make it out of your head unless you're an amazing chef. But if you're me, I follow the recipe because otherwise it's going to work out a disaster. And it's just that step by step process that I think we're missing. So that was kind of my core idea, that sometimes when I was speaking with people, they were like, I just don't know what to do next. And it was just breaking it down into smaller, tenable chunks, and taking one step at a time. And then I would kind of nearly encourage failure. I'd say, look, you know, when you come back and let me know how your week was, I'm kind of looking for the bad, to be quite honest, because this is where we learn.
Yeah,
Don't tell me how everything was so great. I'm like, well done. But really, I'm looking for, where were the disasters? When did you fight with your husband?
Yeah.
You know, when did it not work? And that's where I want to get to, you know, those real hot trigger spots to kind of cool them down, to soothe them, to soothe the person. And I think that's what happened. We're kind of nearly all on fire. We're just running. Whereas my kind of idea is just, how do we soften this? How do we soothe this? And then you can process.
Do you see everyone that you work with as completely different, or are there just a lot of patterns that go across people that seem to recur over and over in your work?
It's really interesting. I may see like literally thousands of people presenting for anxiety, and the symptoms and the presentation may be very similar, but no two people are the same. And what I kind of love about the work is that I'm so interested in figuring out what that actually means for that person. So when I hear words in sessions such as, this sounds silly, or I should, or I know I shouldn't feel like this, then my ears prick up, because I know that it means a lot to them. And again, it's that kind of underlying sense of shame that they shouldn't feel like this. Other people are worse than they are. But all that matters to me is then I kind of nearly imagine the wound, and I'm like, right, now we need to go and address the actual trigger point here, and kind of heal the wound that's presenting itself in those words.
Well, I love your approach because it is so grounded. You know, I've been on a deeply spiritual path for about 25 years, and I've studied under some wonderful, wonderful people. But there's a lot out there in this new age world that is very ungrounded, and you know, like you said, not practical. There was an interview I came across where you had shared. I think somebody was talking about shyness. And I was extremely painfully shy. My mom was an actress and just naturally a people person. And I was terrified, always in my own mind going, I'm stupid, you know, I can't think of the right thing to say. And I would blush all the time. And I think they were talking about, you know, well, there's this oxytocin spray and you can just spray it and, you know, it takes it away in an instant. And you were like, but wait a minute, that doesn't get to the root of why this person is feeling this way and, you know, causing this pattern that they can actually change permanently rather than depending upon something outside of them. They have that power inside to shift that. And I thought that was amazing.
It is. And I really try and get clients to connect to their body. I mean, we do live so much up in our heads. So when a client is in session and they're talking about an emotion, I ask them where they're feeling it in their body at the moment, and I always ask them to connect with it. So whether it's their heart, or it's their throat, or their head feels like it's going to explode, or it's their stomach, and then I actually get them to close their eyes. And the tears, they're very different types of tears. They're kind of like just this stream that comes out as it's such a deep connection, that people are always quite taken aback. So I am 100% about evidence-based, and yet very balanced in understanding the intricacies of being a human being, and that we are deeply sensitive people, like, you know, so much affects us. So it's just to kind of cultivate a different type of self-protection, but also a compassion, because I think we have become, you know, say even with shyness, there's this kind of concept, especially with like introverts, that it's nearly a negative thing. And yet I think we need to, especially with sensitivity, I hear that a lot. people will say, oh, my family say I'm too sensitive, and it's immediately inferred as a negative. Perhaps we need more sensitive people in this world that has become too reactive, too harsh, too hateful, and just to kind of sit back and stop the judgment that happens within, that we immediately think, well, okay, my mom, she was effusive and an extrovert, and that's where she got her energy from. But maybe you got your energy from a walk on the beach. Maybe you got your energy from ideas in books. But isn't it sad that we kind of infer that by comparison yours wasn't correct?
Yeah, no, I love that you say that, and it made me think of, I had a guest on the show, this was a while ago, Dr. Shivali, and she had been on Oprah a bunch of times. I saw her and I loved her. Her book was on, her whole platform is like conscious parenting, which I think of it as conscious adulting, because the truth is, as I'm a parent, I've got 2 children, and I made so damn many mistakes, and I guess there's no mistakes, but there really are in my world, that I parented through my own pain of my own childhood, through that baggage of my childhood, and I didn't want my children to have the pain that I had, so I tried to give them this perfect childhood. There's no such thing, and the pain comes out at some point. So what is that, as adults? How do we do better? How do we, look at these children, not as children, but as really future human beings? And because that's what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny, the parenting chapter is the only chapter that I tried to keep as little theoretical in it as possible, because I feel there's too much noise in the field of parenting. And a psychiatrist I really like is Dr. Kayleen Henderson, and she talks about kind of the origins of the mommy wars, and the why we're so quick to judge parents. And it all comes back down to procedural memory. So basically, when you see another parent doing something that isn't from your family norm, it's like when driving the car on the wrong side of the road in your mind, and you're like, they're doing it wrong. So I think parents are trying too hard to be these perfect parents now. And honestly, you will be triggered by your children. The only thing I would kind of implore is that people are aware when you're being triggered. Like, I know for sure, I have 3 girls, and I know my triggers. That does not make me better at it, not necessarily, but I try. So time, like when I'm late, and one of them is the biggest dawdler you could ever imagine. And maybe she's doing it to trigger me, even unconsciously. It's
Catherine does that a lot.
I do not.
Yeah. Like, we would be ready to go, and she would run upstairs and change her entire outfit.
Let's see what
But I give myself time.
No, and to circle back a little bit of what you said, I think it's really important to bring this out, is our society is becoming more and more polarized, and we're thinking in terms of right and wrong all the time. And,
Yes.
Quite frankly, right and wrong, I'm not really sure what that means.
Not so black and white.
Yeah. You know what? Like you said about being an introvert and things like that. Like, I really like being an introvert. Okay, so I need to work on sensitivity part, but
just a little.
There's no right and wrong, really. I mean, there is, but
there's a
they're on the ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. There's guardrails, but in between,
right.
we're very judgmental inside of
Yes.
ourselves and the next
We're
outside
very
ourselves.
judgmental, and I think black and white thinking, I mean, when you think about it from brain development, black and white thinking is basically what happens when you're a teenager. And I suppose in a positive way, that's why adolescents can be so kind of, like, this is wrong and that is right, and it might be very lovely in what they're actually saying, but there's a naivety to it because there's so many other aspects as to why that situation is the way it is. If we take it from a moral point of view, and I don't mean that in a religious sense, in terms of right or wrong, I always used to love those games. I don't know if you had them, but we had some game here. It was kind of a moral question game. It actually was fun, but I always really enjoyed it because you'd be given scenarios.
What was the game called?
I can't remember, but I remember you'd be given a question like, you're homeless and your child is sick. You have no money. What do you do? And I'm like, I'd rob the shop. But someone else.
Jean Valjean, right?
It would spark this great debate, and someone's like, but that's wrong. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Let your child die? So I really think there are, 50 shades of grey in this, and we have become too simplistic in terms of that's right, this is wrong. I do think that there are basic right and wrong, of course, but I think that we have to cultivate compassion in our heart.
Yeah. Compassion. I think compassion comes from our own awareness. The more aware we are of what's going on inside of ourselves, like you said, our patterns, our triggers, our wounds, our inner child, all this is so complex. And I have become so much more compassionate with myself as I've gotten older, which helps me be compassionate with others, because I was always so hard on myself. I grew up hating myself because that's what I was taught. And as I, started connecting internally to all these old stories and wounds and pains and started healing them, everything started changing.
And growth is about that, right? Growth is about experimenting and trying new things on. And I want to get back to the Boston Red Sox for a second. But
I don't.
Bear with me.
I'm in LA. I'm
Catherine,
in LA now.
What stadium do the Red Sox play in?
Fenway.
Okay.
I could have even got that.
There you go. Have you ever gone to a concert in Fenway Park?
I have.
Who did you see?
Billy Joel.
Okay. Allison, are you familiar with a song by Billy Joel called The Stranger?
How does it go?
It goes, we all have a face that we hide away forever, and we take them out and show ourselves. When everyone has gone, some are satin, some are steel, some are silk, and some are leather. They're the faces of the stranger, but we love to try them on. There.
Not bad. I wouldn't dare do that.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, that's pretty good.
The reason I wanted to bring that up is because when I read, part of your book, that's the song that came into my head because, the Russian dolls thing. We all have different pieces inside of us that sometimes come out, and just kind of was wondering what your reaction, not to the singing, but to the, the types of the lyrics in the song.
I really like it, and I came across a wonderful TED Talk. I think her name's Marianne Cantwell, Marianne Cantwell, and she talked about again being culturized, if there was such a word, to fitting in the box, and she just was like, I don't ever fit into just one box, and she called it luminescence, and I just loved that idea.
That's beautiful.
And to me that really resonated because like my husband said to me years ago, you have 9 different selves. Like, this is a long time pre the book, and he named them all, and I was like
this is not a show about Sybil, but we all have Sybil inside of us, right?
I was like, you're a keeper. You're right, and I remember doing a psychometric once, and the person testing it afterwards kind of gave out to me and said, you couldn't possibly be scientific and love art and love fashion. And I said, why not? And he said, you did it wrong. And I said, no, I didn't. Now, I was quite young, and only that I was, I don't know, balchy. I just kind of I thought that's a ridiculous thing to tell me, that you can't be all those different things. But I think as a society we feel uncomfortable if we don't just fit in one little neat box, and I don't think adults fit into neat boxes. So I like the idea of fluidity, and I think once your core self is obviously intact and you know who you are, isn't it lovely to kind of dance in between different roles and be a loving, joyful, silly parent one day, and then be quite serious and influential at work the next day, and then you're warm and kind with your parents, and then a different type of laughter that happens with your friends and your siblings. So I love that kind of fluid dance where we're kind of luminescent.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
I love what you said too, because what came to mind immediately is like luminescence is just this big ball of light, which is really ultimately what we are. And I don't mean in a woo way. We are all really light, but we just have these shadows inside of us, and you can't box that up, right? It's going to peek out here or peek out that crack. And so these women coming into FierceCon, it was amazing how many of them were so uncomfortable. I mean, to the brink of discomfort. Many didn't want to come, had to push themselves to get on that plane, or were hiding and, but really talking very openly about that experience. And it makes me think of, the pearl. The pearl, how does it become a beautiful luminescent pearl? By the irritation, right? A lotus grows up through the mud, a phoenix rises from the ashes. We have to oftentimes be pushed to that. So we become aware of what's going on inside of us. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable, but I feel safe enough now that I can let, like you said, walking into therapy, let that mask fall. And one after the other, those masks were dropping, those facades were falling, and they felt safe enough to allow their true self to emerge for themselves, first of all, and then for others, and went, oh my God, I'm more than okay. I'm pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I suppose one of my kind of intentions of the book was that what I see when people come in is that the crisis has been the catalyst, where the person has hit rock bottom, or at whatever level and in whatever different relationship it is, that they have come to seek help. But I thought, isn't it a pity that we have to have a crisis in health, in our mental well-being, in how we feel in our lives in general, to actually change? And I do understand genuinely that change is incredibly difficult. Everybody says they want to change, they want to be happier, but to actually get to that requires so much growth, and growth requires you to stretch. And stretching is uncomfortable. And I think you become allergic to having the necessary conversations that often are deeply uncomfortable, and we're so terrified of showing, as you said, our shadow side. But we have to have that. If you are too happy all of the time, it's a state of mania. It is not good. It's not balanced. There has to be a balance. And I think connecting to our humanness and our absolute imperfection is something far more beautiful than this facade that we have everything under control, we're doing perfect, we have no feelings, and we're just spinning all the different plates miraculously. I just think, from my perspective, then I just see the distress levels rising in the general population.
And what do you see the impact of social media on all of this? Because it seems, we now live in a world that was completely foreign to me growing up. Once a month I'd get the glossy magazine and look at the models, but they were special and different. And now everywhere you look, everyone's edited, everyone's looking perfect, their lives look perfect, their homes look perfect, their dogs look perfect, their children look perfect, their babies come out looking perfect. And it's like, oh my God, there was enough pressure then. I can't even imagine the pressure now.
I think the pressure is huge, and I suppose that's why I would love the narrative to be for, children and adolescents growing up now, that, I don't know, to stop the endless pursuit of happiness, to stop the endless pursuit of perfection that we are basically saying to people that they need to have. As I said, nobody posts up the picture of mopping the vomit off the floor from one of your children, or when the dog poops on the bed. Like, no one's putting that picture up. It's all our best presented self all of the time. And, we are comparing. And I suppose, when I think of the adolescent brain, it is intensely sensitive to what its peers think. That is how you are wired. So for something that is to connect us, I think we're living in the most connected, disconnected society there ever was.
A false sense of connection.
It's a false sense of connection, because our brains and our facial expressions, nothing can change that. And I mean, when we think to the original beginnings of our attachment to our parents, and then how that creates our worldview from that point forward. I even worry now our kind of younger parents, like, what impact will that attachment have if your face is stuck in a phone the whole time? And I think it's just, we don't know how, we haven't created the healthy relationship with it yet. I think there's lots of positive to social media, but I think we just haven't created a healthy relationship, and maybe that's just something that we can encourage.
Yeah, just a healthy balance to use social media, and also, like you said, to use it to help others. You can put the pretty picture. I put plenty of pretty pictures up, but I talk about the reality of life happens behind the scenes. That pretty picture is not my life. That pretty picture.
But I really feel there's a depth even in the picture, and even though it is fabulous, and I love fashion 100%, and it is very inspiring, and the color is inspiring, but the message has depth. There is beautiful intention behind it. There's authenticity there, and there's passion with a purpose.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just vacant, that shines through too. So I think I love pictures, and I love celebrating beauty and celebrating, our strengths, and they encapsulate the physical, the mental, and the emotional, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's packing a punch when it comes with a wonderful message with yours. And I have to say, I love the rewire and inspire. I mean,
thank you.
It's just music to my ears.
Thank you so much. Well, I know we have to wrap up.
Yeah, but one question.
What?
If I'm correct, you had a choice in your life, right, to be a psychologist or a fashion designer?
Yeah, I did. You did.
Is that
Choice
correct?
point. A choice point.
What happened?
You know what? I can still do the fashion at some stage, I mean, like, I really I like the idea of always growing and always changing. Like, I kind of had the choice. I was like, will I be an architect? And I was like, the building would probably fall down because I'm best at maths. But it was the beauty. I like it was the art. It was the fashion. It was the psychology. And I love all three still to this day. And who knows, maybe I will do something with it. But right now, I mean, my passion is in people and inspiring them. However,
well, it's interesting. I'm going to give you an example of that, because when we were walking up to the studio, Catherine was walking into the elevator, and she had on her beach sandals.
And my flip-flops.
And I said, you don't always wear beach sandals out. She goes, no, I've got my high heels in the bag. And I said, well, what are you going to do with them? She goes, I'm going to put them on for the show. I said, your feet are under the table. No one's ever going to see them. She goes, it doesn't matter. They make me feel better on the show.
I completely agree, and I'm wearing ridiculous shoes right now as well, but they're fabulous, and they make me feel better.
So maybe the fashion psychology is a field that could be.
There is. When I was doing the post for Jacqueline Jones, I did all my research on the psychology of shoes, and it's really fascinating. I mean, it really does literally elevate your mood, and fashion, I found it to be literally life-changing. So. And that's a whole other show. So it sounds like we're going to have to bring you back and back again, because we didn't even get into the whole aging, psychology of aging, and how this whole revolution started was really to shift a perception of.
Or even just talking about Ireland.
Or talking about Ireland. Yeah. Ireland. I'd like to just have the brogue. Can I have the brogue? I don't do that so well. But no, truly, I mean, I think there are so many different conversations we could have had today, because it's so important. It's like your book is the 7 key relationships. The number one is with yourself, and that's the one we actually aren't taught growing up at all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and especially for children of alcoholics, it's you're told to disregard your own feelings, and it's always about someone else. So, cultivating that in yourself it's a game changer, but it's an incredibly difficult one when you've never done it until you do.
It takes immense courage, and I think what you just said is brilliant, because if you've never done it and then you do, this something shifts inside of you, and every time you do that, you build this internal confidence and this internal self-worth, this internal self-esteem, and sense, I can do this. I did that. I can do this, and the emotional stuff to me is harder than anything in the world.
Of course. And I mean, it's at a huge level. I mean, basically the experience and the trauma and those memories will cocoon you in, don't do anything different, because the consequences could be very, very serious. So that's why when you're saying about those women, and when the masks dropped, the fear would have been palpable, because the consequences they had seen over the years could have been very, very serious. So you understand why, I suppose, Michael, in answer to one of your questions from before, people might have done something out of expediency that might have worked in that moment, but when they become defense mechanisms, such as, putting everyone's needs first all the time, that's something that I find can really trap somebody.
Well, it ends up being a lot like what, I don't know the space you create in your office, but the sense I get from your book is it's this really, really safe, sacred space, and that's what they walk into. We created intentionally, very, very intentionally, this bubble of kindness and energy and compassion that allows them to do that. Nothing's forced. It all just happens. It just falls away because they realize they don't need that armor.
I will send you a picture, or I'll send you a quick video before I leave now, because my office is the most amazing place ever. I come in here and I just breathe a sigh, and it's the most beautiful smells. I have all the candles, and all the artwork is my own. People come in here and the healing begins as they sit on the chair. And I think that therapy, you need to wrap the person in a space. It's a beautiful old Georgian building, so basically, like, the ceiling is 20 foot tall in here. I'll send you a quick video.
Yeah. I'd love to see it.
It is the most healing room I've ever been in, and even just me being in here relaxes me, and every client says this, and I hit them at every level. It's the lighting, it's the smell, because that triggers your old memories,
all the sensory.
And it is an absolute core healing session just from the environment, because I've trained in places that were so miserable,
clinical,
miserable leaving them.
Shut you down.
No, that's not going to happen.
When's your next opening? I'd like to go over and book a session.
I know. I think we're gonna have to do that. We're gonna have to do that. Irish Air, come on, fly us over. Is there an Irish Air? So,
it's
all
called Aer Lingus.
Aer Lingus.
Yeah.
Well, Allison, this has been pure delight having you on today, and like I said, I truly hope we can continue the conversation, and hope to bring you, connect you with the community, because I think a lot of these women would be very, very delighted by you and your message and your grounded, approach to psychology. So let's our audience know, how can they find you, and if they want to work with you, if they want to find your book. Obviously, we'll be sharing it in our newsletter as well.
So I think at the moment, The Secret Lives of Adults is on Book Depository in America. And I think it will be on Amazon.com soon. And then I'm Allison.Keating. It's ALLISON.Keating, KEATING. On Instagram, I'm the Be Well Clinic on Facebook, and Allison Keating 1 on Twitter.
Wonderful. Well, we will be sharing, like I said, in our upcoming newsletter, your book and links to buy that book. I've found it incredible and fascinating, and we definitely will have to bring you back. We could have many conversations here. Open those Russian dolls. Let's cover them all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, go Irish Photog. We kind of ran overboard here because I didn't even get like the 3 things for our audience, but we'll follow up. We'll make sure she comes back, because I think this is an audience of women who would be hungry for the incredible wisdom that
I think it's
Allison
very
shared.
apropos to just what we saw, at FierceCon, and really the evolution of the Forever Fierce Revolution group. The evolution of the revolution is really casting aside some of the evolution.
Is that
of
a
the
song? Are you going to come up with a song?
You know what?
A rap song, like the guy in the comedy store.
I want to say 2
Evolution
things.
of the Revolution.
I want to say Red Sox again, and Billy Joel. If you want to come and explain
So you got
the lyrics to The Stranger, you got to come on
Billy
Catherine's show. Billy Joel.
Billy Joel, you got some splaining to do,
Exactly.
and you can bring Christy with you, even though I know you guys split. But she's pretty cool, and she's an amazing midlife and beyond woman. We'd love to have. I thought I'd throw that out there.
You invite a guy to come on the show, and then you invite him with his ex-wife?
All right, well, come on by yourself. Come on, bring it. But he's got all these cool people. So anyway, I'm just teasing. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I thought Allison was just amazing. Her book, The Secret Lives of Adults. I know I have plenty of secret lives, and I'm trying to figure myself out as we speak. And what about you?
Let me know when you get there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm peeling some layers. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.
You're listening to Forever Fierce with Catherine Grace O'Connell, only on LA Talk Radio.